Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, whatever. It could be tomorrow if you're connecting from the other side of the world. We are doing this from the United States and at United States time zone. So just in case, I hope everybody feels included in this conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Please, if you are connected on LinkedIn Live, on our Hacking HR platform, or Facebook Live, please let us know in the chat where you are connecting from. It will be amazing and lovely to know where you all are tuning in from. This week, and today, we are wrapping up this Hacking HR expert series. And in this month of March, with the theme Break the Bias. And it's not a coincidence that we chose this theme for this month because we are celebrating International Women's History Month in March. And the theme of this year, both International Women's Day and International Women's History Month, has been Break the Bias, and more broadly, break the bias and discrimination at work. We've had a number of amazing conversations over the past 3 days. Today is the fourth day. We're going to have a couple of sessions, a couple of hours today. But the past 6 conversations every day of the week this week have been really, really amazing. All of the content that we have created this week throughout this in these conversations and throughout the week will be made available to you in the Hacking HR Lab by next week. So stay tuned. If you missed any of the sessions this week, or if you have to miss any of the sessions today, don't worry, it will be all available to you. So we are wrapping up with a couple of really powerful and fantastic conversations today. Now, starting in a couple of minutes, we are going to be welcoming our panel to discuss making anti-bias and anti-discrimination strategies stick. And what we want to talk about is how to rally everybody around diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And that this has been one of the perhaps most common elements of the conversations we've had over the past 3 days, which is how to bring everybody together, how to approach those both business leaders and just individual people in the organization who may not see either the value of addressing this discrimination and bias at work, and how to bring them on board to and rally everybody around diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So that's what this first panel of the day will be about. The second panel and last panel of the day, which I'm going to be moderating to wrap up all the conversations we've had, will be how to move diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice in the workplace, anti-discrimination, anti-bias at work, how to move all of those things forward forever. And we're wrapping up, going back a full cycle, if you will, from the first conversations we had this week, which were around thinking of diversity and inclusion as a business imperative rather than just like a nice to have at work. So we are going to have really powerful conversations today. Once again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Please let us know where you are connecting from once again. And I'm going to start welcoming our amazing panel of speakers. I'm going to begin with our moderator for this first session in the morning. Sally, hello. Welcome. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Good. Good. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be hosting. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is a star panel, so I can't wait to be chatting with them.
Very, very much so. I am eager to learn from all the insights that will be shared during this conversation. I'll be, just the curiosity is just overflowing, to learn from all the experiences, the personal experiences, the insights that all this amazing group of people have gone through in their careers, and all the work that they are doing now to move this to continue to move this conversation of true diversity and inclusion forward. So, Sally, I think you're going to have a lot of fun in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Well, let me start welcoming your panel today. Mary, Noel, Tatiana, Abby, and Colin. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Sally, you have 3 veterans of Hacking HR conversations in this panel. Abby, Tatiana, and Colin. They've joined a lot of the events that we're doing. I want to with all my heart, welcome our first timers in a Hacking HR panel, Mary and Noel, who are joining us for the first time. They are founding members of our Hacking HR Experts Council, and this is the first time you both are joining a conversation with us. It's wonderful to see you. I am so excited to learn from you, and I hope you have a lot of fun so that you do it again. So Sally, I'll be in the background. If you need me, just give me a shout out if you need any support in anything, and I'll be learning from all of you. So Sally, please take over this conversation, have fun, and enjoy it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I know some of you have seen on LinkedIn, I'm literally starstruck. So thank you everyone for joining. I'll start by introducing myself quickly. My name is Sally DeRosa. I am the president of HRWise. We are a Canadian-based HR information systems solution. And I am an HR practitioner by trade. Been doing it for about 15 years now. And DEIB, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, is a topic that's really, really close to my heart. So when Enrique brought it up to the table, I jumped real quick, because these are conversations that we really need to be having on a more regular basis, both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So to be surrounded by the 5 of you who are just as enthusiastic, if not more, about this topic is an honor, truly. So I'm really excited. I'm going to get right into it with the first question, which is kind of a half question. The first half is, please take a few minutes or a few seconds to introduce yourself and your role. And the second one is, I'm curious about your commitment to DEIB, and if it has like an origin story that you'd like to share, why it's so important to you today. I'm going to take turns just this time, and after that, we'll go a little bit more conversational. So let's get started with Colin.
Great. Thank you. And it's good to see all of you. It's good to be with all of you. Some familiar faces on the panel and in the chat. So I'm Colin Mincy. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at Human Rights Watch. And I've been in that role for a little bit over 2 years. And, in my capacity there, I, oversee all of the traditional areas of HR, but I particularly, focus on stress and resilience and DEI. And for me, the elevation of DEI, the fact that DEI is such, is in the forefront of so many conversations, is important. Just because for an organization like ours, it's really critical that we live our values, and so the values and virtues that we extol on the outside, we want to make sure are alive and well on the inside.
Perfect. Thank you. Mary, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Finch, and I am the head of people for Iris Worldwide. It's a global agency, and I support as the head of people across our America. So that's our North America, South America offices. And your question was, how did I kind of fall into DE&I?
Or why is it so important to you, if there is an origin story there as well? So we all know it's part of our day-to-day job and whatnot, but sometimes it hits closer to home, or anything you're willing to share there.
Sure. And I'm glad you said that. Some see it as a job. I see it as an obligation. I look like this every day. So I automatically fit into the category, and I have a platform to use. So therefore, it's just something that's just natural. I'm not a, what do you call, a traditional human resource person or professional. And I just pride myself on showing up authentically every day. So I want the office and others to feel the same way.
I love that. Thank you. Noel, if you want to go on that.
Good morning, and Mary, we are vibing right now. So my name is Noelle Peart. I'm the head of diversity, equity, inclusion at Exos. It's a health and human performance company. And I've only been at Exos just about 90 days. Prior to that, I was with Best Buy for 14 years. And so to Mary's point, I'm not, traditional in this space, and this is who I am. But from an origin story, to your point, Sally, I think about as a child, right? Thinking about when I was faced with microaggressions as a child, or received racial slurs. And I think that kind of put me in my past when I think about high school and college, and the things that I've kind of fell into later on in terms of my thesis and majors and those kind of conversations. It was always about helping others and finding ways to stand up for those who may not have a voice. So to me, even though as a child I probably wouldn't have put myself here, it's no surprise when I think back to my life that I'm in this space. So thank you for having me this morning.
Awesome. Let's go with Tatiana.
You say starstruck. I'm shaking because I believe I know nothing and I have to learn from all of you, though I've been doing this for a few years. Tatiana Tarshan, I'm currently the Chief People Officer at Meet You, which is a global event solution provider. So it's a tech platform that makes you immerse into events digitally without having to travel. So it's also, very environmentally friendly. I'm in charge of the entire people spectrum, which also has a lot of emphasis on, of course, our culture, and our culture that is founded in trust. So trust obviously means, all the key buzzwords like psychological safety and making sure you can bring your whole self and all that stuff. But what does it really mean? And this is where the story is. It actually means to really feel safe enough to be yourself and to know what the boundaries are, if there are any, and to kind of have a bit of a play kit and then some rules of the game that actually make it easy for everybody to decide whether they want to be part of it or not. It's rooted in my story and in my personal life. I've never really belonged in a way. I'm Croatian with my roots, but born in Germany and raised there. Always been between different kinds of dimensions of life, different family household than when I went to school, different types of career I chose than everybody else around me, became a working mom, became a traveling mom, and enjoyed high-tech industry. So clearly lots of things there that are not quite typical or normal back in the day. So it is something that I strongly believe, if I kind of felt that there is something that we need to work on, that it's only manifested over the last years in my profession. And I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So super passionate about the topic from a personal standpoint, but also because I see it as a huge lever for organizations to really be at the right place, attract the right people, and then obviously do good, not just for the people, but also overall for society. So super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Tatiana. There's so much in your introduction that I'm going to want to break into during the panel. So thank you for that. And finally, Ebby.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Happy Thursday. I'm Ebby Ajabo, and I'm currently the Vice President of Global HR Operations at a company called Axalta. Axalta is a chemical clothing business that employs over 14,000 employees, almost 14,000 employees across 40 countries. So it's pretty global. I've been here since September. It's been a wild ride so far. It feels like 6 years versus the 6 months. And prior to Axalta, I've been in HR. I've managed HR technology my entire career. So I'm not the technical or traditional HR person. I have a very rich background in technology, but that makes my role in HR fascinating. When it comes to diversity, I have a personal story to it. So I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, but I grew up in Nigeria, and I was in Nigeria till I was 17, 18. And when I moved back to this country, the more I've navigated America the past 20 years, I am so grateful for that diversity in my upbringing, because growing up in the majority Black country gave me rooting that I just didn't understand. Because when I moved back to this country, I could walk into any room and believe that I belong, because I got to see Blackness in its full humanity growing up. I got to see Black senators, Black rich people, all parts of Blackness. And knowing that I was different was actually a strength. So to walk into corporate America and have to try to modify myself, I've never kind of believed in that. So I always tell myself, I look for my people. Who are my people? I'm going to meet people. It's like, where's the company that would allow me the space to be who I am, show up how I am, and just contribute and deliver results. So diversity is really important to me, not just from a perspective of what we physically look like, but also that we're 7 billion people on this planet, but we have the unique privilege of experiencing life through our own personal lenses. So I have 5 siblings. We all grew up in the same household. We could recount an experience, and we all experience this differently. And I find it so fascinating, because it's like That's what you got out of that. That's what I got out of that. But it's not from a stance of like yours is invalid or bad, but it's just fascinating. So diversity is critical to me, especially as someone who leads digital transformations, because I like to hear diverse perspectives because it always offers me the blind spots, the things I'm not thinking about. So it fascinates me that I'm like, even when it's disparate or it's not even, we're completely like, I'm on Mars, you're on Earth. I'm fascinated by that because it's like, that's what you think. That's interesting. Tell me more. So for me, it's more of like an exciting thing because it allows me to consider perspectives that my brain would never contemplate some of the things I hear from other people. So that's what it means for me. It's just being open to hearing people's opinions. I don't always have to agree with it.
I think that's going to guide us so well into the first question. All of you actually have kind of touched on it, but truthfully, diversity and inclusion is how this journey started. Let's face it, when we're talking about people management. So it started as diversity and inclusion, and then it expanded to diversity, equity, and inclusion, still sounding very business-like. And today we're at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which is something that you've all touched upon a little bit. And we're not done, clearly. I think we're going to learn throughout the journey. But for today, what is your view on what it means for an organization to be, I won't say compliant, but aligned with DEIB? And I'm going to open the floor. Please jump in. If that doesn't work, then we'll go back to taking turns. But if you're inspired by any one response, please jump in.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So for me, and forgive me if I reframe the question, but for me, an organization that's truly committed to DEIB has a dedicated resource and capacity first and foremost. That is not someone in HR's responsibilities as an afterthought, but has an actual DEI leader in place with resources and with access to the highest levels of leadership to ensure that there's a strategy, that there's executive buy-in, and that there's a plan and a roadmap on naming and claiming all of the things in the organization that need to be attended to from a DEIB perspective. The second thing I would say is there's a space for all staff, particularly staff who are part of affinity groups, to sort of weigh in on how the organization is sort of meeting the moment from a DEIB perspective. They are, there's transparency around goal setting. There are dashboards around performance, and there's sort of a shared community and a shared commitment around making sure that all people, regardless of their background or their level, feel that they're respected and invested in, and sort of part of a fabric, to really create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. So I'd say that's where I'd start, is that there needs to be capacity, and it needs to be a full-time dedicated job, not an afterthought, from someone who was hired to do something different.
All the mics are open, so I'm so excited to hear you all. Why don't we start with Mary?
Sure. Just to kind of piggyback off of what Colin said, and you actually just you set the tone really of, I think, everything that I was just thinking about. But I agree, just having a strategy in place, something that is transparent, something that is visible, something that leadership also has agreed upon, and in that commitment, that piece of going from a presentation or this is the plan to actionable items of how we actually want to move the mark, because it's one thing to have the discussion and have the buy-in and not see things move. The other piece that was also kind of tapped into was that while there might be a dedicated person, it shouldn't rely solely on that person to be able to bring everyone together. That is a huge responsibility, and one that should not be placed on just one particular person to do that. But having a platform where you have, either a task force or ambassadors, someone that's in every market that comes together, has the conversations, and can create the culture from different offices. I'm sure there's like different nuances when you're in a larger company or agency where everyone is coming to the table and just having the conversations about what they're seeing in their market, things that they want to do, and then trying to bring that uniformity together. So I do think it's everybody's buy-in. And then when things do take place, such as events or activities or things that you want to initiatives that's kind of going forward, making sure that leadership is visible, because employees will follow what they see their leaders do. So if they take time to do it, employees will also. So just making sure that it's a message that's just not internal, but something that's also external as well. But make sure that you're doing what you say that you are doing before you put anything external out. So I think that those are the things that are important for organizations.
Great. Go ahead, Noel.
Yeah, Mary and Colin said it beautifully. And the one thing that I'll add to that piece is not just with the strategy piece. I think it's making sure that the leaders that are outside of just the HR function understand the return on investment when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right? So, I've been in my company only a few months, but it was getting clear on day one. Let me tell you how this work shows up everywhere, from our hiring practice to our retention strategy, to even, your hourly staff, leadership meeting, right? And I'm very clear to say, it's not saying, oh, it's 9:15, let's do a DEI, conversation, right? And take the next 15 minutes. I'm clear that this is from the beginning, right? This is woven into everything when we're talking about how we interact with clients, how we create, safe spaces for our teammates. And I think that's really important too, that everyone understands it's not an and to the strategy. It is the strategy. And I think that is so important, especially when I think about our middle management leaders. Sometimes they forget that, right? We have senior leaders who get it, and the employees, the teammates get it, but it's that middle group. Sometimes we have to let them understand, like, this is how you succeed in the work. So I just wanted to add that piece on.
Perfect. And I agree with all of it. And I know we didn't get to Tatiana and Ebby, but I'm hoping you can answer my next question instead, because it does piggyback a little bit on everything we've talked about. What we've talked about is what does it look like to have at least a proper DEIB structure within an organization. Now let's talk about why. And I think the six of us here obviously know why, but the point is you've got to get the buy-in from, to your point, Noel, your management team. They're going to be your champions, your sponsors. And so we're selling this to them. What is the why? And I'd like to start with you, Ebby, on this one.
The topic of diversity always fascinates me. And I say this with the context of my experience at Corporate America. I've been in Corporate America for almost 20 years now. And there's been countless studies about the success factors for businesses to be diverse, to have diversity in your leadership, your suppliers chain, and things like that. So if businesses innately exist to make money, why do we have to convince people to get diverse to make money? Diversity, to make the case of diversity to make money. So to me, it becomes more of like, do you want to do it or don't you want to do it? Because we can't keep talking about it. Because if you exist to make money, and it's been proven from very reputable sources that diversity 2 times more than any other factors drives success or drives more profits than your competitors, drives competitive advantage. And we're still spending constantly trying to convince them. After the past 2 years with the pandemic, I've made a personal decision that I don't have to talk about it anymore. The case has been there for years. I don't have to tell you why. If I have to tell you why, then you don't want to do it. So what I want to have a conversation around is, how do we do it here in this organization? Mm-hmm. How do we get the right leaders? How do we make it innate in our culture? How do we get our board or external governing bodies aligned to this? And how do we hold ourselves accountable as an organization to create diversity to drive our numbers? Because it is a business initiative. You're not trying to make the world a better place. Like, you're not doing any charity work. It's, if you're existing to make money for the business, this is the way to make money for your business. So what's the hesitation? So I'm not, because I'm like, I don't have to convince you. We've talked about this in so many different ways over the past. I'm like, if you don't get why now, then you and I should be having a conversation. Because
Oh, I've got follow-up questions for you, Ebby, on that one. But Tatiana, do you want to add to that?
Yes, beautiful segue, Abby, and I can feel your passion and the rage around it. So I meant to say similar things, and maybe just adding a bit more flavor. I think, as you say, as long as we have to talk about it, something isn't right. And that's where we should start. So if we still need a strategy, if we still need to put it on a top priority list, then something isn't right. And I think this is where it starts. It's a microcosmos. Any company is just a replication of society. So we have to live like a society, even within walls and even within whatever mandate we have, whether it's profit or non-for-profit or whatever. But the truth is, we are replicating what society is. So we have to have some ground rules. We have to understand how to really treat each other well. If it then has a business impact, well, nice on top of it. But I do think we are just having a different conversation that we shouldn't be having. Yeah, it's always like, it sounds so hard. When you put it into business and you say, we should have this, and here's why it's important, and it's an initiative, and we put resources on it, it sounds like it's an extra, which is not. It should just be what we are doing day in, day out. We are living creatures, human species that need social interaction. Well, then somehow we need that as a foundation in who we are and how we operate. And then, of course, if we replicate our client base, clients will trust us because they think we're doing the right thing, so they will buy. So there's your commercial profit and benefits. We don't need to discuss it. It's going to be a natural result of what we're doing. But I think we sometimes miss the trick of, we need this, in a certain pattern, in a certain format, in a certain strategy. And then a discussion becomes very hard, whereas it should rather be something like, it's just who we are. We have to have it. There is no debate around ignoring or neglecting it. So thanks, Abby. Love that.
I love that. I wouldn't be the host, though, if I didn't challenge you, so I will. So what I'm hearing from this panel, and I agree wholeheartedly with, is that it should be part of the fabric. It's who you are, both in exactly your internal vision, mission, values, as well as your external ones, which relates back to who you deal with as suppliers or customers, etc. So with that, I agree. If you're having to negotiate this too much with your leadership team, you probably don't have the proper leadership team on board to be able to drive this. I get that. However, where I challenge is that you will often hear leaders say, we are diverse enough. How do you deal with that?
Show me.
It's like getting the definition of what diversity is. Because again, diversity is not just visual. So if you have people from diverse backgrounds, and it also ties into, I think, who are your clients? What business are you supporting? If you feel that you have enough diversity on your team or your leadership team to represent who you serve, then so be it. So I don't think there's one canned response for what diversity means. It depends on what makes sense for your business. If you're a consumer product company and you have a diverse base of consumers, it will serve you well to have a diverse pipeline of leaders or leaders who are making decisions about how you place products, what products you develop. So I think it's more, an organization has to define that diversity. So I can't say to someone, oh, you're not diverse, because a definition of diversity may not mean the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be that theirs is wrong. It's just that it's relevant for their organization. And if it is, then so be it. That's what I would think, because I don't think it's standard.
Colin, I see your brain going a million miles an hour, and I can't wait to hear it.
Well, I agree with what Abby just said. I have to tell you that conversation is just a non-starter for me. We've been talking about diversity since I was an intern in the 90s. And the reason we're still talking about it is partly because it's important and it's a continuum, and it's partly because we haven't gotten it right. And one of the reasons we haven't gotten it right is because we think that hiring people who are from different places and look different is the end of the story. And the truth of the matter is that it's not, because if we're hiring folks from diverse demographics at the lower level of the organization, but we're not seeing them represented at all levels of the organization, then we've got a problem. If we aren't tracking the advancement of these folks in contrast to their counterparts to see how they're being elevated and mobilized internally, then we have a problem. And if we've not set a culture that welcomes and accepts and nurtures, folks from diverse populations, so that we hire them and 2 years later they're out the door because we haven't created a culture of belonging, then we have a problem. So, I always tell people, you can tell the difference between butter and margarine. You can tell a difference between the original and a cover. And people know the difference between intentional leadership around DEI and intentional commitments. And starting the conversation with, we already have diverse people, sounds like someone who is just trying to do what's perfunctory and not actually do the real work.
I agree. I agree fully. And I think what I also picked up on in your in your response is that we can say certain things, but until we show them at all levels and for all people, then we are none of those things. And so I guess my next question to the panel, whoever wants to jump in first, is how do we know we are doing those things properly? How are we measuring the fact that they are at all levels, that people are advancing? Talk to me a little bit more about I guess, more the structured part of ensuring that we are doing it in a fair manner, to be honest. It's a bigger one. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say the reports don't lie. I mean, when you pull reports and you see where people are across ethnicity, when you survey your people to get feedback, those things don't, while the feedback might be subjective, it's the employee's truth, but the reports don't lie. And I hate to take a step back, but something that you said about if a leader is saying that we are diverse enough, that HR professional is going to have a long, hard role. They've already kind of hit the bricks on this one. So that's just pretty much telling you that we're not looking to change. So if you are coming in as an HR professional trying to, be a change management and rally all the troops and make sure that we're on one accord, you are not on one accord. So
I think this conversation is so deep. It's bringing so much, at least introspection, even to me, but to our viewers right now. And I did mean to rock the boat. I did it with purpose. But you're absolutely right. And when you hear the five of you guys speaking so surely about what this actually means, it shows the rest of the population that there's a lot of work to do still, I believe. Noelle, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, and Mary's right. The reports and numbers don't lie. And I would add to that, it's not just looking at the demographics. Like, where's the promotions at, right? Like, let's measure that as well, because I think someone said it before. I think it was kind of like you could have them on the lowest level, of your organization, and to your point, say, oh, we're diverse, right? But when we look at it in terms of who is getting promoted, are we placing talent or are we promoting talent? And regardless, how are we measuring that? And what is that conversation like? And who's making those decisions? Also, let's look at when we're interviewing, right? What do our talent pools look like? Who are the folks who are conducting the interviews? Like, there are so many other pieces of that measurement that we can even take it a step further, I think is important. And then when you have, people that leave, right? Because there are going to be folks that leave organizations. What are those exit surveys, say? And then what are the things that a lot of people are talking about that we need to do more of is the stay surveys, right? What does that say as well? So I think in our measurement piece, you can pull out some other additional pieces just to make sure that we're really asking the right question. So.
But I also think that, in my experience, companies already know these numbers were already out there. So it's like, how do you make them actionable? And that's where there's an element of frustration, because it's like, how many more times are we going to talk around this issue? We don't ask how we're finding out if we're profitable. We don't ask how we're measuring that we're scaling the business, how we're tracking that. Why do we have to keep trying to run around? It's already there. And that's why I think without businesses or business leaders making this a business imperative, like an initiative on the business level, like committing to really center diversity as a business transformation initiative, we're going to be here in 20 years still having the same conversations, because I think the answers have always been there. The data has always been there. It's like, now, how do you take that and make that actionable? We already know all of this, but it's till the business treats this as equally important as other business strategies. I just, I don't mean to sound pessimistic. It's just because of my own my experience, because it feels like deja vu now for me, because it's like, didn't I have this conversation 20 years ago at this company, and I had it. So it's more like, till business leaders buy into that. And there was a session I listened to with CEOs 2 years ago after the whole George Floyd incident, and one of the CEOs said something that really resonated with me, because he said, when you think about companies that existed 20 years ago, or that were the top 10 companies 20 years ago, they are not relevant anymore. So when you think about where the world's demographic is going, who your consumers are going to be in the next 20, 30 years, companies have to center diversity to succeed in their business, because you're going to have an explosion of these underrepresented groups be more of the majority. So it's not, they're going to have to decide, the business will decide for them, because in order for them to stay competitive and to keep their businesses, they're going to have to become more diversity averse or consider diversity. So it's just a matter of really focusing on those businesses, or aligning with those business leaders who truly believe that this is a priority. And the pandemic highlighted that, because you can see all the statements went out, and when you read them, some of them sound exactly the same. So you know it's the same consulting firm, but we can see what they've done and those who've sustained. And that's who should then keep leading the conversation, and we can keep leveraging them as case studies and try to replicate them, because for them, it's no longer an HR initiative. It's now a business initiative. So that's just my 2 cents, or my stream of consciousness there.
I'd like to add to that, Abby, because I think you made a super important point here. We always keep saying HR and the business. And I think this is where the drama starts, because we are business. So if we say the business leaders need to get it, then obviously that implies that we're speaking different languages. And I think this is the first form of diversity. How do we get the same language? How do we make sure that we understand what exactly we mean by that? Like, what is diversity? Diversity is not just different boxes like gender and age and, color of your skin. What else is it? Can we agree on the language? Because that will tie us in, that will make the sticking glue. So we are not longer talking, it's HR doing things and the business doesn't get it, and the CFO doesn't want to pay for it, and the CTO doesn't care if the artificial intelligence gets it wrong, la, 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 la. It's more about, what's the language in this place? What are we trying to really achieve? What is diversity, if it's an issue, if it's a benefit, an opportunity? What is it? But then let's talk equity. Are we giving fair and similar chances to similar types of people? Yes or no? And then inclusion. Are we giving everybody a seat at the table where we think, everybody should at least try? And then we can start filtering whether they, are up to the par in terms of performance. But first of all, let's open the floor. And I think this is why we sometimes miss the trick. We keep saying like they need to get it. No. They already get it. They have the numbers, as you say, Abby. They have the reports for ages. There has been SAP and other CRM systems forever. It's more the question of what's the language? Are we the ones to step it up, or is it the others who have to come our way? But we have to find that commonality first. Then we're talking. Once we're talking, we can start doing wonderful things. But I think it's just a note of caution also to our listeners to hopefully, find some opportunity in there.
Colin, did you want to add something?
I do, and I think that Tatiana makes a really good point about finding spaces to sort of move the needle. I always tell people, not to lose sight of how far you've come by looking at how far away you are from the finish line. You got to look at from where you've started. So I think that's an important point. The other, just two things. One, just because people know better doesn't mean that they are better. And so, one thing we've done at Human Rights Watch is we have made DEI training mandatory for all people who manage staff. We're not talking about cookie cutter, sort of DEI training. We're talking about microaggressions. We're talking about biases in decision making, and from there we have tied DEI to our code of conduct, and from there we have tied DEI to performance evaluations, and from there we have made DEI a strategic imperative, because if you don't know, we will invest in getting you caught up to speed. But once we've made that investment, there's an expectation that you get it, and that the people that you lead sort of experience your leadership from a DEI lens. And those who can't buy into that can get off the carousel. But in order to work at our organization, our expectation is that this is not something we talk about in passing. It's not something we talk about during Black History Month, but this is part and parcel of how we conduct ourselves, how we do our work, how we collaborate, and how we communicate every day.
Yeah, no, I think we haven't addressed the question in and of itself, but all of the answers combined are bringing us to how do we make these anti-bias strategies stick and rallying everyone around diversity. It really does have to start in the fabric of your organization, your culture, your vision. So I appreciate what you are all saying. I might just for a minute take a step back, because despite it being part of how we move forward and how we are, who we are as an organization, unfortunately, in 2022, there are organizations who are not actively having these discussions. There are viewers who are HR practitioners who want to bring this into their organizations and are not quite sure where to begin. So why don't we just take a couple of minutes and advise them with the 5 experts we have on the line here? Where would you begin if you were an HR practitioner who really wanted to bring more visibility into DEIB within their organizations and don't currently have much? It's a big question, existential. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say, one of the things that my agency does within IRIS is that we have listening circles. So, for a professional or practitioner that's in the field that might be the person leading the initiative on DE&I, I do think that it's important that while you come in with your ideas, you listen to the people that you are serving. And with those listening circles, we have the opportunity to be able to listen to employees, have conversations, very open conversations to get real-time feedback. Sometimes we'll tie that into like a survey, but we try to make sure that we're not just sending out, check the box type deals where we're actually having live conversations and then playing back what we actually heard. So I think that that's important. It's just really listening to the employees to see how they want to move the mark. And it also gets them involved and there's accountability throughout your organization from the people that you're listening to. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I just add that what's worked for me is to start with stories. So storytelling from different parts of the organization, what does it mean to me? And I remember very vividly still after so many years in a large corporation where a senior male leader realized that when he talked to his teenage daughters about picking a profession for an internship, that she only had a very narrow view as to what she thought she would be qualifying for. And he was a tech person working in an engineering department, and he was just stunned that it would never occur to her, even though he's working in that, he's kind of a direct role model right in front of her, and it wouldn't occur to her that she could even pick that kind of profession. She was never told that this was an option. So that kind of story broke really into people's awareness to say, even if it's right in front of you, it doesn't mean you see it all the time. And you better be very aware what people see and understand and treat as DEIB issue or opportunity. So I would always argue, start with storytelling and try to get a story from every level of hierarchy and from as many backgrounds as you can, because that will give you a very strong baseline, what really is moving people. And why are they in your organization? And how do they still feel that they have place and at a good home there? And that will almost inform what you need to do next. So it's very valuable.
Noelle, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll just say take from Mary's listening circles and such as the storytelling. I think that it's I think Colin mentioned before, is the access to those senior leaders and then using that information, right? Because what you can't do is gather the information and then sit and say, oh, what do I do with it now? And I think it may not necessarily always be your CEO, right? Like I think maybe it's leveraging the relationships that you have, but I think that's the important, when you make that connection and say, let me tell you how this personally affects me. When that leader has stake in you and I share that information, it blows the story out the water because they personally know me, that connection piece. So I think that's really important in this space. And then again, it's making sure that those senior leaders understand. So maybe bringing them to that listening circle, even to the lowest level in the organization, because if they're only hearing it from their peers, or maybe they're one level down, it may not resonate. But when they understand this is why you have that retention problem, right? Let me bring you to this group. I think that's where it starts to shift, the hearts and minds, and people say, oh, okay, I'm hearing it differently. Because I'll tell you, those the lowest level of an organization, they have nothing to fear in how they want to share information. They will tell you with no problem, and that is the honest truth that you want to be able to help move the organization forward. So, like I said, I've been privileged to be in some of those conversations, but those are truly what makes the impact.
I know, Abby, you probably wanted to add something there.
Oh yeah, I certainly align with what Mary and Tatiana said, and something Tatiana said earlier kind of triggered something for me. She mentioned something about that we're living creatures, and for someone who's starting off in this like starting off where they have nothing like this, I say humanize. I think one thing the pandemic has done, and I hope it stays, is the idea that employees are people. So if you would start on that basic conversation about who are people, and you combine it with what Tatiana said around what are the stories that make up who our people are. So that's just diversity. Just even having the plain conversations around who are the working parents, who went to the same schools, like who grew up in the same area, like things that actually humanize the people around you. And you realize that what's so diverse is not so diverse anymore, because we are human. We all share these kind of lived experiences, but we're experiencing them differently. And then the more you listen, like Mary said, I think that's setting the stage for your diversity, or even opening the conversation for diversity, because those things will kind of just present the richness of the perspective that exists in your organization. So I just think at a base level, because a new HR person, I'm thinking about them just trying to take on the load of becoming the DEI contact, can just start off at least being just humanizing. And I think the pandemic has just really set the stage for us to be able to start having those kind of conversations in that way. You're on mute, Sally.
Sorry, I spoke to myself. I said if there was ever a silver lining to a pandemic, I think we found it. You nailed it. And then, yeah, I would like to see if Colin can add to that.
Not really, because, well, you know what's interesting? I've been sitting here thinking, when we started this conversation, you heard most of the folks on the panel say that they were not traditional human resources professionals. And the one thing about the pandemic that has been an equalizer is we're never going to be traditional HR people again. And what I've told my team is that the way that that HR leaders have had to step up without a blueprint, without guidance, and lead in uncertain times means that we have the credibility and the ability and the capability to lead even when we're not asked, and maybe even when the organization's not ready to go into spaces that we think are critical to safeguard and support staff. And so when I think about DEI, I think about the responsibility of DEI leaders and HR leaders. It's sort of our contract with our colleagues to make sure that ours is a community that people feel safe in, that people feel engaged in, that people feel invested in. And I don't think that there's one right way to do it. But I think the best starting point is listening to your colleagues through surveys, through listening circles, whatever mechanism, and find out what it's like to be so-and-so, a day in the life and so-and-so at your organization. And from there, identify themes and trends, that you want to fix. You don't have to fix them all at once. Just start gradually. And with each small win, you gain a little bit of trust. And if you keep going, I think you can really make a bigger difference. So that's the only thing that I'd add is that, after this pandemic, I don't know how anyone else feels. I feel tired, but I also feel like if I can get through that, I can get through the next thing and the next thing. And I think that that's the kind of energy we have to approach important topics like DEI.
Go ahead, Tatiana.
I just meant to emphasize what you said, Colin, in terms of not ready, like when an organization is not ready and we step up. And maybe that's the similar thing with DEIB. Even if it's not ready, we kind of know the stuff, we have the tools, and it's again a way to shine. It's just an opportunity to not back down and to really keep going for it, because it's the only right way to do anyway. So I love what you say. I think nothing can knock us down anymore after all of these experiences. That's for sure.
We are drawing so close to the last few minutes, and I cannot emphasize how energized I am by all the responses that you guys have given today. And I'm really honored. So thank you for allowing me here. If I can also share my takeaways from what I've learned from you guys at the end of the day is that DEIB, DEI, call it whatever you want to call it, is part of a bigger conversation, which leads us to empathy, another conversation that we need to be having within organizations. And it leads us to breaking the mold of business is business, because in fact, business really is personal. And that is not something that we should be afraid of verbalizing either. It's kind of a change from past generations as well. So we do have 2 minutes left. If anybody wants to also throw in their 2 cents of lessons learned here, I would love to hear it for sure.
Yeah, and this group is phenomenal, Sally. So I've definitely enjoyed it. But what I'll say is, and it came up in a lot of the conversations, I think it's about making sure that we bring everyone along on this journey, right? And I think that's the key thing. So it's not just, hey, make sure we have a diverse workforce. It's not just, hey, make sure everyone's included. It's also make sure everyone that's included has a voice at the table. And I think when you talk about DEIB, that's what that is. It can't just be check 1, check 2. It has to be the whole conglomerate to make all of it make sense. And I think that came up in a lot of the conversation this morning when I listened to these amazing folks. And this is how we're going to move the needle forward in the work. And I can't even say needle we got to just move the whole ship forward in terms of this work, and everyone's part of it. So I think that's another message I'll just add, is that it is everyone's responsibility, right? Like, this is a team sport. We say that at Exo is great. This is a team sport, and this is a team sport.
Yeah, the quarterback can't score by himself, so I agree with that fully. Abby?
No, I was just going to say that as frustrating as it's been, that there's hope. It's fascinating. Like, while it feels like the same conversation, is the level of enthusiasm keeps increasing, and there's all these excitement and exciting new ways of doing things. I am hopeful for the future. As much as it feels like not much has been done, there's been a lot of progress made, even in micro levels. And I think keeping that in mind and celebrating the wins while we keep going for the big push is critically important. That we acknowledge where we've had really good wins while we're still, pushing it all through, like Noelle said.
Good. Well, honestly, thank you, everybody. Our time is up, so I think we're going to have it up to wrap it up today. Feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn, and we hope to see you on another panel. These are now all people, panelists that will be back for sure. I think you'll want them back, and we hope that you benefited from this.
They will be back. I'm hoping so. Thank you so much, Sally, Mary, Noelle, Tatiana, Abby, and Colin, for being part of this amazing conversation. I am like taking a lot of notes in here, which when I'm moderating, I don't have the time to do them myself, but it's been such an enlightening conversation. So thank you so much. Everybody who is tuning in whatever platform you're tuning in from, stay tuned in, because in the next 4 minutes or in 4 minutes from now, we're going to kick off our last session, not only of the day, but of this entire series of Breaking the Bias and Discrimination at Work. So once again, Sally, Mary, Noelle, Tatiana, Abby, and Colin, thank you so much for being here. You stay safe and stay well and continue moving the ship forward. Thank you so much, everybody.